The late afternoon sun shimmered across the grounds of Arlington National Cemetery, casting long shadows over the endless rows of white marble headstones. A hushed reverence always clung to the place, but today, that silence was about to be shattered. Ethan Caldwell, a tomb guard assigned to the tomb of the unknown soldier, stood at rigid attention. His every movement was crisp, exact, and timed with military precision, as if the weight of all fallen soldiers rested on his squared shoulders. Tourists often gathered quietly, their phones out, but few dared make a sound in front of the sacred site. That was until the man in the designer suit walked forward, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the stone walkway. He wasn't like the others, his gait screamed arrogance, and the way he looked at the ceremony was more annoyance than awe. His name was Charles Whitmore, a billionaire CEO known for his ruthless business tactics, his cold disregard for anything that didn't serve his empire, and his obsession with always being the most powerful man in the room. With his gold watch glinting in the light and his entourage trailing behind, Charles smirked as though the world existed to serve him. When a quiet child shuffled too close to the barrier, Ethan lifted a white-gloved hand in warning, his expression unchanged, his duty unshaken. But Charles sneered at the motion. He whispered something mocking to his assistant, then stepped closer to the guard. The crowd began to notice. Phones tilted upward. A murmur ran through the onlookers. Something about the way Charles squared his shoulders, puffing his chest out as though he wanted to prove dominance, made everyone uneasy. The guard remained unmoving, silent, a living embodiment of discipline. That stillness, that refusal to acknowledge a man who was used to controlling boardrooms and bending governments, ignited a dangerous spark inside Charles Whitmore. And in that moment, arrogance became action. Without warning, Charles closed the distance and stood inches from Ethan. "Do you know who I am?" he hissed, loud enough for the closest bystanders to hear. Ethan did not reply, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting Charles's face back at him. For a man like Charles, silence was infuriating. He thrived on fear, on compliance, on people scrambling to accommodate his every whim. Yet here was a soldier, stoic, immovable, utterly unimpressed. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mixture of shock and anticipation, like the hum before a storm. Ethan, bound by honor and the code of the guard, could not break bearing. He could not react, he could not flinch. That only drove Charles further into fury. His lips curled into a snarl, his pride boiling over, until in one sudden, reckless motion, he raised his manicured hand and slapped the soldier across the face. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot, echoing against stone and monument alike. Gasps ripped from the crowd, some people instinctively stepping back, others fumbling for their phones to record the unbelievable moment. For a second, time seemed frozen. The tomb guard's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but he did not move, did not speak, did not betray his oath. That restraint only made the scene more surreal. Charles laughed, actually laughed, at the strike, shaking his head as though he had proven something, as though his dominance was unquestionable. His entourage shifted uneasily, clearly aware that what had just happened would not remain confined to this cemetery. Parents covered children's eyes, veterans in the crowd bristled with barely contained rage, and one elderly man removed his cap, his hand trembling as he held it over his heart. Everyone felt it. This wasn't just disrespect. This was desecration, and it demanded a reckoning. The crowd's outrage swelled like a tidal wave. "Call security," someone shouted, while another voice cried, "He just hit a soldier." Charles, smug and unrepentant, smirked at the chaos. His assistant nervously tugged at his sleeve, whispering that they should leave before things escalated. But Charles waved him off, raising his chin high, basking in the attention. Ethan stood frozen in disciplined silence, though every fiber of his being screamed to act. The oath of the guard forbade retaliation or breaking bearing during duty, but this wasn't just a test of discipline, it was a crucible of honor. The cameras flashed, recording every angle, every expression, every second of Charles's arrogance. By now, dozens of phones were streaming live across social media, and within minutes, the incident would be broadcast around the world. The cemetery police, alerted by the noise, began to move quickly toward the disturbance. Charles, seeing them approach, chuckled under his breath. "Go ahead," he said arrogantly, "let them come. Do you know how many senators call me for favors? Do you know how many generals owe me their careers?" His words dripped with entitlement, his ego feeding on the very idea that rules and respect were beneath him. But the crowd's anger only grew darker, more dangerous. Veterans in wheelchairs rolled forward defiantly, others clenching fists at their sides. The weight of history seemed to press down on everyone present, demanding justice. And though Ethan could not yet move, though his oath demanded stillness, the moment was building towards something inevitable, something Charles Whitmore, in all his arrogance, could never have prepared for. The police arrived, their radios crackling, eyes wide with disbelief at what they had been told. One officer, a young recruit, hesitated at the sight of Charles's expensive suit and entourage, unsure of how to proceed. But another officer, a decorated veteran himself, stepped forward with fire in his eyes. "Step back from the guard, sir," he ordered, voice like iron. Charles chuckled, brushing imaginary dust from his cuff. "Do you even know who I am?" he repeated, louder this time, as though the phrase was a shield that had always protected him. But this was no boardroom, no private jet, no penthouse office where money bought silence. This was hallowed ground, and the rules here were not written in contracts but in blood and sacrifice. The officer's jaw set, and he repeated the command, firmer. When Charles refused, shrugging with disdain, the officer signaled his partner. Gasps erupted again as the billionaire's arms were suddenly seized, twisted behind his back. Charles's arrogance cracked, replaced for a flicker by disbelief. His entourage shouted protests, threatening lawsuits, demanding the officers let go. But the veteran officer only muttered, "Not here. Not at the tomb." The crowd erupted in applause, cheers breaking through the tension. Phones recorded the takedown from every angle. Charles struggled, still shouting about influence and connections, but for the first time, his voice wavered. The mask of untouchable power was slipping, and everyone watching felt the ground shift. Something greater than wealth or status was at play here, and Charles had finally met a wall he could not buy his way through. As Charles was dragged back toward the cemetery gates, his face red with fury, Ethan Caldwell finally allowed himself the smallest breath, the faintest exhale that no one but him would notice. His oath had held. His bearing had not broken. The tomb of the unknown soldier remained guarded with the same silent reverence as it had for generations. The crowd's cheers did not move him, the world's cameras did not sway him. He was the embodiment of duty, unshaken by arrogance, unbroken by insult. Charles continued to scream threats, shouting about CEOs, senators, contracts, but every word fell emptier than the last. The police officers did not falter. The veterans saluted as Ethan continued his watch, their eyes shining with pride and tears. Somewhere, deep inside, Charles must have realized that for all his billions, for all his influence, he had just been humbled before something far greater than himself. And when those videos hit the internet, when millions across the globe saw a rich CEO slap a soldier of honor and then be dragged away in disgrace, the shockwaves would reach farther than even he could imagine. For Charles Whitmore, this moment was no longer about dominance. It was about legacy, and his legacy had just been rewritten in real time, not as a titan of industry, but as the arrogant man who struck a soldier at the tomb and lost everything because of it.